Hey guys, so welcome back to another video where I talk about my experience of watching Super Sentai for the first time. Just like the last video, I want to thank the Super Sentai fandom for all their enthusiasm and encouragement behind these videos. I love your passion and I'm inspired by it. My experience so far with Super Sentai has been mostly positive, a good 95% positive. Of course, there's the occasional hater, the occasional gatekeeper, but we ignore those people. So, what shows am I going to tackle today, just in case you didn't read the title? So, to start with, on my first Super Sentai video that I ever did, I talk about my experience watching Bioman. The moment that I mentioned that show, almost every comment that I got was along the lines of, "Oh, good, you watch Bioman. That show is great. But have you seen Jetman? Or are you going to watch Jetman? Or, dude, you should really watch Jetman then, if you like that one." So suffice it to say that my curiosity towards this show kept growing exponentially. And before I committed to it, before I committed to watching it, I decided to do a little research, find out more about the show, and almost every fan page, every Wikipedia page, every social media account that I found related to the series, every review that I found on the show included a line that was along the lines of, "This is the best Super Sentai in the genre," or other variations of that line. So I still wanted to approach this show with low expectations. Because my feeling was that I'm sure this show has to be good because people keep recommending it to me, but it can't possibly be that good. It can't possibly be the best in the genre. Especially when there's over 40, close to 50 different Super Sentai right now to this point. So I sat down to watch it, and a good 6 to 10 minutes into the first episode, I came to the realization that it was the best Super Sentai in the genre. Now, before I start talking about it in detail, now please keep in mind that that's just an opinion, and if you think another Super Sentai is better and you have your reasons for that, that's perfectly fine. I also would like to point out that, in spite of the fact that it's the best one I've seen so far, it's still not my favorite. I still prefer Bioman and Kaku Ranger. But it's really, really good, and I understand why so many people are so passionate about it. But if you think that other ones like Sun Vulcan are better, that's okay. That's perfectly fine. Or Time Ranger is another one that's incredibly popular. That's fine. But so far as the ones that I've seen, I have to agree with most of the fans and the critics. This one is pretty solid. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about Jetman, or as it is locally referred to, Superhuman Squadron Jetman, or Birdman Squadron Jetman, which that's a translation to the title that I don't feel comfortable with, because Birdman Jetman, that's the name of the show. Just call it Jetman. Anyway, so what is this show about? So basically, off screen, somebody that we never see figures out that there's another dimension that we can access via this tear in space. And this other world, this other dimension that we have never explored yet, is full of assholes that want nothing more than to conquer our dimension. So this special government group is called together, called Skyforce, that is comprised of the best scientists in Japan, just Japan, not the rest of the world, just Japan. And their purpose is to build vehicles and weapons and other armaments to defend us from the invaders. They're going to inevitably come through this tear in the fabric of space and try to conquer our dimension. And among the many things that they invented to combat these evil beings from this evil world is this process in which human beings are bombarded with what they refer to as birdonic waves. They are waves that are both bird-like and birdonic. And when people are bombarded, irradiated with birdonic waves, they get superpowers. So one of the main tasks of Skyforce is to find individuals that are worthy of going through this process. So in the first episode, we are introduced to the two big badass heroes, soldiers, members of Skyforce that are going to be put through this process. Ryu, kick-ass, badass Boy Scout and dedicated soldier, and his fiance and fellow soldier, Rie, who is also just as, if not more badass than Ryu. So they bring in Ryu, he sits down in the chair, they bombard him with the birdonic waves, he gets the powers. When it's Rie's turn to take her place in the chair and get the powers, the bad guys come in through the tear in space, and they start invading our planet, and one of the first things that they do is attack the space base that is the headquarters, the orbiting headquarters of Skyforce. And they interrupt the process of Rie receiving her superpowers, and as they are attacking the base, they tear a hole on the side of the space station, and by explosive decompression, Rie is blown out of the space station and presumably killed. This happens 6 to 10 minutes into the first episode. Furthermore, as the base is being destroyed, the machine that fires the birdonic waves accidentally goes off, and 4 more rays are fired indiscriminately at random directions and go towards Earth. All 4 rays hit Japan, nowhere else in the world, and 4 random individuals also receive the powers. So in the first episode, after watching his fiancée die right in front of him, Ryu is ordered to find the other 4 individuals that also receive the powers so they can assemble the team that they intended to be the ones to fight these invaders from another dimension. So something that I pointed out in past videos when I was talking about Super Sentai that annoyed me was that in a lot of these shows, it is very apparent that selling the toys is the most important thing, so the pacing is usually really bad, and they're more concerned with showing the heroes in their costumes and quickly showing them using their mechs and assembling their mechs and showing off the robots that will be the toys that the kids will buy and fund the show that they're making. This is not an issue in this show. In this show, they are more concerned about telling a story and establishing character. And for example, in the first episode, most of the first episode is dedicated to introducing and developing Ryu and who he is as a character. And this is a man who just saw his fiancée died, but is so dedicated to the cause that he will do his job. He will put his feelings aside and do his job no matter what. So right away, in the first episode, we are only introduced to 2 more members of Jetman, not the full team, and we never see the robot or the mechs. We're only introduced to 2 more. And like I said, they are just regular people who were minding their own business and got hit by the birdonic waves and got powers. So a big part of the conflict in the first episode is talking these people into helping out and participating and doing their duty to protect humanity against this invading force. Um, the individuals are Ryata, who is a farmer and wants nothing to do with fighting. He's this nerdy farmer. And Kiori, who is this debutante, this rich, spoiled, sheltered girl who knows very little about real life, um, and has had very few real life experiences outside her mansion and the people that take care of her. Um, Another thing that annoys me a little bit about Super Sentai is that in the first episode, traditionally speaking, the heroes get their powers, they morph, they turn into their spandex, helmet wearing counterparts, and immediately they know how to fight, they know how to use their powers, they know how to use their weapons, they know everything. And very few shows excuse this, have an explanation for it. Like Bioman, the explanation is that their helmets have the information stored in them via a computer built into their helmet that feeds the information directly into their brain. And I believe Time Ranger also has the same explanation, that all the information on how to operate all the weapons and vehicles and how to use their abilities are all in their helmet, and it's just fed via computers directly into their brain. There's no such explanation in Jetman. They simply, Ryata and Kiori don't know how to fight. So that first fight, only Ryu like really knows what he's doing, and the other two are completely in over their heads. And it's just refreshing to see that. It's refreshing to see the heroes being human and being inexperienced and making mistakes. And that's just one of the many really cool and awesome and innovative things about this show and what it does differently. One thing that they tried out that I thought was brilliant, but unfortunately they didn't maintain throughout the show, is HUD vision. And what is HUD vision? HUD stands for heads up display. And it is the camera shots, the inserts that you see in the Marvel movies whenever you see Tony Stark's face inside the helmet and you see the readouts, you see the heads up display. Well, almost 2 decades before the first Iron Man movie made that into a major staple of pop culture and into a reused shot in many sci-fi shows and fantasy shows, Jetman actually did that for the first few episodes. You would see the heroes' faces inside the helmets and how they were reacting to the situation, as opposed to the main character just being gone and the superhero taking over, which is what they generally do for Super Sentai, and why the Power Ranger adaptations work, because you never see the heroes in the costumes. You just see the costume. You just see the heroic version of the character. You see their stuntman in the outfit take over. But there is a constant effort throughout the series to preserve the characters no matter what, even when they're in costume, and even when there's another person in the suit playing them, because the stuntman who played the Jetman in costume would still maintain the same physicality as the actors who would play the characters when they were out of costume. Like for example, Ryata, he's a very nerdy character. That's who he is. So he doesn't walk or run heroically. He always has this bumbling, very nerdy, very awkward physicality to him whenever he would move, and that would continue on when he was in the suit. As I've complained before, like one of my issues with Die Rangers is that I would forget who was who in the suits when they transformed, because the characters weren't very well established in those early episodes. In Jetman, that's never a problem. You never lose sight of who's who, and even when they transform, even when they stop doing the HUD vision, because it was just an extra step that they didn't need to, just adding another day of shooting to an already complicated production. So they got rid of the HUD vision, but even then, because of these amazing performances by the stunt team, you would never lose sight of which character transformed into which member of Jetman. So like I said, first episode, introduction to Ryu, he only finds two of the members of Jetman, the two of the people that were irradiated with the Birdonic waves. So episode 2, the three of them, finally find the last two members of the team. One of them is Ako, who is a female high school student who is more concerned with making money and getting ahead in life. But she's a tomboy and she loves to fight, so she's very easily convinced to join Jetman. And then the final member, Guy Yuki, who is a hard-drinking, gambling, smoking, womanizing, loner douchebag. And it's the best character in Super Sentai ever. Holy crap. So he is a guy who has no interest in helping others, saving the world. He is the poster child for the reluctant hero. Through his experiences in his life, his attitude is that nobody's ever going to come to help you, so you should help yourself. You know, what's in it for me? That's his point of view. And Ryu, who's a Boy Scout, who's a guy who always does the right thing no matter what, doesn't get that, doesn't understand that, but instead of going against Guy, his attitude is he will inevitably see that my path is the right path. So Ryu's attitude, instead of combating him, instead of, fighting him, hating him, being at odds with him, is to kill him with kindness, to show him via example that my way is the better way. And one of the things that I love about this show, on top of the fact that the characters are very well defined, that their relationships are very well developed, is that every single moment in the show is earned. And very much like Daniel LaRusso and Johnny Lawrence relationship on Cobra Kai, where you see them interact and you go, why can't these guys just stop fighting and listen to one another and get along? If they just worked together, they could achieve so many awesome things. You just want these characters to be friends. That's the same feeling that this show elicits from you as far as the relationship between Ryu and Guy. If Guy would just stop being a douche and just listen to Ryu and cooperate, they would be friends. They would be the most formidable team ever. But the show is a slow burn, and them officially becoming allies doesn't happen until many episodes into the show. And when it finally happens, let me tell you something, it's one of the most satisfying things in the world. That moment where, like in Final Space, they always talk about the clasping hands. That moment when they clasp hands like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Carl Weathers in Predator is so freaking earned. It's the most satisfying handshake in the history of fiction, because when Ryu offers Guy his hand, and Ryu finally goes, all right, fine, boom, and they just shake hands like, all right, I'm on board. Whew, it's just one of the greatest and most satisfying conclusions to a subplot on a show that you'll ever see. And there's this beautiful moment. There's this recurring moment throughout the show where they need to go on a mission, but Guy is missing because he's always off on his own, like Wolverine. He's always leaving the team. He's always off on his own. And they need to find him, and Ryu always finds him in a bar. And Ryu walks into the bar where he stands out like a sore thumb. He doesn't belong there. And he goes up to the bar, and he orders a milk at a bar. And of course, Guy always makes fun of him, always pokes fun of how he is so out of place in that location. And there's this beautiful, wonderful moment when one of them is, they just got through this very difficult mission, and one of them is at a bar, and I believe Ryu walks up and orders the usual drink that Guy orders. And it's like a whiskey or something like that. And he orders it, and the bartender puts it in front of Ryu, and then Guy is the one who orders a milk, and he gets a milk. And they both look at each other and they trade drinks. And they both raise their glasses, and that's the end of the episode. And it's just perfect that they're finally on board. But I'm telling you, there's a lot of build-up towards them getting to that moment. And I don't know if it was a coincidence or a reference, but there's a moment during an AEW pay-per-view. I want to say it was the first All In where they did Stadium Stampede, where Kenny Omega and Hangman Page recreate exactly that moment where they toast at a bar, Kenny with milk, and I think that Hangman has a whiskey maybe, and they clank glasses and drink, and some of the milk spills over into the whiskey, and Excalibur says, oh, he's going to drink some whiskey flavored milk. And I think it might be a reference because Kenny Omega is big into Super Sentai and anime, so it might be. But who knows? It's just an extreme coincidence. Those two moments are exactly alike. But yes, this was the show that aired the year before Dinosaur Squadron Ohranger, the show that was adapted into Power Rangers. So if Power Rangers had been produced 1 year earlier, it would have been Jetman would have been the show they would have adapted, which is a shame that that was not the case, because as good as Ohranger is, Jetman is definitely better. And another great element, as I have illustrated through Ryu and Guy's relationship, is that there's a lot of infighting within the main characters, and not just the good guys, but the bad guys as well. The beings from the other dimension, from the negative dimension, also don't get along well, and are always infighting and vying for power. And there's not necessarily a main leader to the group. They were teasing that they were going to introduce like the big bad of the season, the one that was going to lead the bad guys. There was an empress that shows up at one point, and she gets usurped almost on the same episode, if not a couple episodes later. She gets eliminated right away because it is a constant vie for power within the bad guys between Count Radagat, Tram, Gray, who's a smoking, drinking cyborg, awesome character, and Maria, who turns out to be Ryu's fiance, who died during the explosion in the first episode. She ends up getting sucked into the other dimension, and she becomes a member of their group. I think via brainwashing. It's also implied that time passes differently in that dimension, so she might have been there for years and just gotten brainwashed into becoming part of their group. So yeah, there's a lot of infighting. So, and most of the time, the conflict within the groups, between the Jetmen and the interdimensional bad guys, oftentimes that conflict is more interesting than the conflict when the two groups go against one another. I'm telling you, it's awesome. And now the question that I get the most is, how do I feel about the ending? So I'm not going to give it away, but the ending is notoriously sad. And people keep asking me, oh, how did you feel about that? And I thought it was fine. I enjoyed it. Life is unexpectedly tragic. Even when things work out, they never 100% work out, or they never work out the way that you expect. And also, please keep in mind that the show just kind of cuts off and leaves the results of what you see at the end up to the audience interpretation. So you can fabricate a 100% happy ending if you want to, or you can keep the bittersweet ending that you're presented with. You never see a definitive ending to the show, and I like that. I like that things never work out exactly the way you expect, and that the battle against evil is ongoing. It never stops. Just because you fix one thing doesn't mean that the whole world is fixed. That everybody is a kind-hearted or just individual. There's always going to be bad people in the world, and they're always going to do bad things. But that ending also illustrates beautifully how these 5 individuals change so dramatically from the beginning of the show to the end of the show. And that, to me, the progression of the characters was more important than a happy ending. So that's why I'm okay with the ending, or the implied ending, that we were presented with. So there you go. All right, so we looked to the past. We looked to the show that existed, the Super Sentai that came before Dinosaur Squadron Zyuranger. We've looked at that show and the 2 shows that followed it and that were adapted into future versions of Power Rangers. So we looked at Dairanger, we looked at Kaku Ranger. Let's look at the next show that was adapted into a season of Power Rangers, which is Dash Ohranger. Ohranger. Super Powered Squadron Ohranger. This is the show that was adapted into Power Rangers Zeo, when Power Rangers officially committed to changing the theme of the entire show every season, very much like their Super Sentai counterparts. As opposed to just taking the footage of the mechs and the monsters, and just giving the Rangers new Zords every season. Like I said in my first video in this series, Power Rangers Zeo is when I stopped watching Power Rangers. I just thought it looked lame. It was a step back. That is not the way I would describe Ohranger. It is a very badass, very exciting, very action-packed show. This show has some of the best action sequences out of all the Super Sentai. It's very impressive. However, famously, this is the show that nearly destroyed the franchise. The ratings were very, 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 very low, and there's a lot of fans who don't like it, who thinks it is one of the worst Super Sentai and one of the most criticized. Now, why is this? Essentially, the complaints stem from the fact that the show that was delivered was not the show that they promised. Originally, Ohranger was supposed to be the Super Sentai version of G.I. Joe. It was supposed to be this elite, superpowered team of soldiers going up against terrorists that were using similar technology as the Rangers. We were supposed to see villains who can transform and summon weapons just like Super Sentai heroes and pilot mechs into battle as opposed to giant monsters. Unfortunately, though, for Ohranger, there was a terrorist attack in Japan at the time, and they just felt that it would have been insensitive to make this glorified fantasy about fighting terrorists. So they completely changed the premise of the show mid-production. Now, early in the series, this is very apparent, as there are a lot of moments that are very serious, and then they will be undermined by moments that are very goofy. And then halfway through the show, it's like they can no longer pick a tone. And for every serious episode, you will get an episode that's just completely goofy, and it feels like it belongs in a different show. And a lot of people attribute this lack of consistency to the failure of the Super Sentai, which ironically, its American counterpart was the show that was supposed to save Power Rangers. And of course, Power Rangers Zeo had huge ratings in the beginning, but steadily dropped. Um, for Ohranger, the drop happened much, much earlier when people tuned in to see the super serious, badass G.I. Joe version of Super Sentai and got this wacky show where Super Sentai heroes were fighting this goofy machine army. So, what is Superpowered Squadron Ohranger about? Well, the story actually starts 500 million years in the past, I believe, when all the land on the earth was one big supercontinent called Pangea, and all humanity was just one big culture. So, as it turns out, according to the lore of the show, this culture was a very advanced culture and had amazing technology that was way ahead of its time, including robots that were our servants. And just like any other sci-fi story that involves robots, eventually the robots got sick of serving humanity and turned against us. And a war started between man and machine that resulted in the destruction of Pangea, of the supercontinent, and everything, all the land on Earth spreading out and becoming the land masses that we know now. And when the war concluded, humanity won, and the robots lost so badly that the few that were left completely left the planet. They just went off into the stars and to regroup and get ready to return one day. Fast forward to the present, they are now the great Baranoia Empire, with plenty of weapons and disposable soldiers, and they have come back to retake the planet that is so rightfully theirs. By a great fortune, there's a military force on Earth, there's only in Japan, that has discovered that this was going to happen because they found this underground cavern with weapons and vehicles and technology from that original culture that inhabited the Earth. And basically the information telling the story that I just shared with you, and that the Baranoia would return one day. And to basically giving this new generation of humans the technology and the knowledge on how to defeat the Baranoia. So they take these weapons and technology that were left in this super secret cavern by this previous society and give it to 5 lucky soldiers, lucky fighters who they consider to be the best, the 5 best. So like I said, in the beginning, this show is great. You're getting a group of professional modern day soldiers, modern day heroes going up against this impossible threat. So that in itself is great. But like I said, the villains that they're going up against, the Baranoia, they just seem goofier. They seem like they're from a different show, and I thought it was a mistake to make every single bad guy a performer in a suit, as opposed to human actors whose faces you always see. Which is a silly statement because obviously the people in the suits are also human. I apologize for that. But I'm just saying performers out of suits that you can actually see their expressions. It's just difficult to take the bad guy serious, to see the hero characters be so grounded while the villain characters are so goofy. Again, the contrast begins early on in spite of so many elements of this show being so well made. One of the elements that caught me by surprise was the Sixth Ranger. In the case of this show, the Sixth Ranger is very much like Die Ranger. It is also a young boy. But as much as I criticize Ko from Die Ranger, the the Tiger White Ranger. As much as I criticized him, boy was I missing him during this show, because the King Ranger, the Sixth Ranger, who's a young boy, is the most boring, uninteresting character. He is a member of that previous society who got into this spacefaring pyramid with the princess from that society, and they just flew into space after the paranoia. And they returned once the paranoia returned. Um, but he's the most bland, one-dimensional character ever. There's not much to him, and when he's not fighting, when he's not involved in the battle against the invading force, there's nothing to him. He just protects the princess, he's the princess's bodyguard, and he's a ranger, and that's it. However, one major innovation that was added during this season of Super Sentai, during this Super Sentai show, I should say, was the concept of the big yearly crossover. This was the first show to cross over with a previous Super Sentai show, and I was delighted to find out that the show that they crossed over with was Ninja Squadron Kaku Ranger. Oh my freaking god. After watching this uneven, mismatched, goofy season of Super Sentai, it was an absolute breath of fresh air to have the Kaku Rangers show up, who I love unconditionally. However, the crossover is only about half good. It's 40 minutes long, which is basically like 2 episodes of Ohranger smashed together. The first half is like your standard episode of Ohranger, with the only thing that's legitimately interesting about that first half being that their mechs get stolen, get hijacked by the bad guys, and they are used to destroy the city and discredit the Ohranger, but that gets resolved very quickly. What is apparent is that the Ohranger are outmatched, and they are just getting their asses kicked for a good 20 minutes, which is something that also happens every other episode, here and there, that they meet a challenge that they cannot figure out how to defeat, how to conquer, how to get over, and through either teamwork or a new vehicle or mech that is going to be made into a toy, they overcome this issue. But here, it just seems like they cannot get any traction until they hit the halfway point, and at the halfway point, the Kaku Ranger show up to help them. The Ohranger get attacked and cornered in a western town, in this western town just so happens to be right there in Japan, a western town called Western Town. And these 2 cowboys show up to help them. They unmask, they rip off their clothes, and they turn out to be the Ninja Sentai Kaku Ranger. And I freaking cheered when they pop up. And immediately the show gets fun again, the show gets awesome again. Other than that, other than the inclusion of the Kaku Rangers, it is a very weird episode where the main villain is this demon, this Tengu, I believe, that the Kaku Ranger are chasing after, that loves to assault women. That's the premise. It's a Tengu that loves to assault women, and it has a long tongue like a snake, and it wraps its way around women and traps them. And that's the thing. So to bait them, they have the two female members of Ohranger play with a beach ball in bikinis. That's an actual part of the episode. So that's weird. But other than that, seeing the Kaku Ranger show up again, they're the best part of the crossover. And that end half, most of that end half, for a good 15 minutes of the show, the crossover, it's really, really good. And the Kaku Ranger just steal the show. And then at the very, very end, once again, it becomes the Ohranger show again, when the monster becomes big and they take their mech and fight the monster alone without the Kaku Ranger. I guess that was okay. but the novelty of the crossover was not lost to me. I enjoyed that aspect. It's just, it's interesting how the Ohranger was the worst part of the crossover, even though it was their crossover. So yeah, this show is not bad, and in many ways is better than Power Rangers Zeo, but it's not perfect, and I 100% understand why so many people take issue with it. So anyway, so those are my opinion on two more Super Sentai, Jetman and Ohranger. Agree? Disagree? Feel free to say so in the comment section below. Will I keep going? Will I talk about the next Super Sentai show in the line? Will I go back in time and talk about another one? Who knows? That's 100% up to you. But now it's time for your favorite part of the video, the announcements. Right now on my Patreon page, in honor of the release of Batman Caped Crusader, I am counting down my top 10 favorite episodes of Batman the Animated Series. And I want to know yours. What are your favorites? So if you want to check out that video and voice your opinion on what is your favorite episodes, what are your favorite episodes of Batman the Animated Series, but you're not a patron, all you have to do is go to patreon.com and pledge $1. That's it. $1, you're helping me to continue to create content, and in return, you're getting bonus videos. Can't beat that with a wooden stick. And now, for the announcement that all of you have been waiting for, what will be my next honest review? One that has been requested for weeks now. From the moment that this show hit, you guys wanted an honest review, and you're getting it. So yeah, to stay in the theme, the next honest review will be Batman Caped Crusader. Bruce Timm is back producing a Batman show, and the Llewellyns are back working on an X-Men show. I'm telling you, the 90s are back. And to commemorate this, since I already did honest review on X-Men 97, why not do an honest review on their main competition, Batman Caped Crusader? So that's coming soon to this very YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching, and as per usual, you guys have my eternal gratitude because I could never do what I do without you.